Hey, APE students. I'm going to give you a lecture on Unit 5.3b. And this is a unit that's about hunger and famine and human nutritional needs. It's a bit of a heavy lecture here, and we will be talking about the fact that not everybody gets enough food and there is an unequal distribution of wealth and nutrition around the world. So we will be talking about this afterwards, and I hope it sparks your interest. Maybe many of you have learned about these things before, but if you haven't, some of it's pretty hard to hear for the first time. So I really want to support you and make sure you understand this. I have behind me a few different books about really interesting things about human nutritional needs. And this book is Food Inc., which is really interesting about the industrial food industry. There's this book called The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan, which is a very fascinating book about how you eat affects what you eat affects the earth. You may know John Steinbeck and Grapes of Wrath, and this is a novel, but it definitely has to do with human migration and how we have gotten food all around the world. And some of his explanations of the Dust Bowl are super fascinating as it relates to environmental science. And then this book, it's not my favorite of all the vegan books that I've seen. This book, Veganize This, is a cookbook that will talk about ways to eat food in a way that it is better for the environment. Now, I want to tell you all that I do eat meat, but I am careful about the kind of meat that I eat and where it comes from, because I know how much of an impact it can have on the environment. So we can have discussions about what you choose to eat based on the knowledge that you have. So let's get going on this lecture. You will be taking notes and then going off and watching a couple of these videos along the way, and your notes are on page 11. Okay, page 11 in your packet. So this is a picture of the magazine, Time Magazine. We are what we eat, and it has some really fascinating pictures of different families. And let's see, this is on top of, okay, there. So in Germany, this is a picture of a family in Germany and their weekly food budget. And so you can click through these. I'm going to go and you can take your time on these and take a little bit more time to look and see what a weekly food budget looks like in different countries with different families. These numbers are normalized to dollars. So you can take your time to look through these and compare and contrast the different countries and the different amounts of money that are spent. Some are quite striking. We'll have a chance to talk about this more in class. So do take some time to look and try to identify things that are in common, things that are more prevalent, perhaps how many vegetables there are compared to how much processed food there is. And they even do have more than one family from a country. Sometimes, like the United States, there's more than one family. And maybe you can find a family that you think reflects the kinds of things that you eat at your household. I'd like you to kind of pick out here the ones that have the most money spent and the ones that have the least money spent, and consider which ones have different amounts of vegetables in them. Okay, And you could just kind of write that over on the side. There's not a specific place to write this down. Okay, so this is a video called What is Food Insecurity? And we'll be talking about this in the notes in just a minute. So you should go to this link and watch it and then answer the questions. And then you should go to this link, which is Feeding 9 Billion People, and watch this video. All right, so now we're getting into, after you've had a chance to watch those two videos, maybe on your own, you could do them out of order if you want to. And now we're going to talk about chronic hunger and malnutrition. So you will be writing this down in your notes. So you're going to write it right down there, chronic hunger, on page 12 in your notes right now. Okay, so this is when you don't get enough calories. Not enough calories are ingested to maintain health. It leads to inadequate brain development and a lower IQ. And 800 million people worldwide lack access to adequate food. And 24,000 people, mostly children, die every day due to starvation. So we are fortunate to live in a country that is developed where we do not have widespread famine, but we do have inequities and we do have malnutrition. So, like I said, this is pretty heavy stuff. You're going to learn a lot, and we will have some time to process and discuss this too. Okay, so all around the world, there are different levels of hunger and malnutrition. So you can look at this map and read the, here, over here. Yeah. So you can read what this map is indicating to kind of give you an idea of what's going on around the world. So malnutrition, this is something you're writing down in your notes. Malnutrition is when the diet lacks the correct balance of nutrients. So you can eat a lot and still be malnourished. So food security is defined by the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. And it's when people have access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that includes the dietary needs for an active and healthy lifestyle. You also have to be able to have access to the food. So this is something that we run into here in the Bay Area in California, is what's called a food desert. So when there's no easy access to food within a certain area. And so that's something we can talk about some more too, which is just really fascinating and heartbreaking that there are places where people that live miles away from us are not able to get food that's healthy and secure for them. And this is something that we want to work towards solving this problem. I promise you, we will be getting towards ways to solve the problem, but you got to learn about the problem first. Okay, so there is food security all around the world. And what's interesting too, and seems like a bit of an oxymoron, but the poor spend the highest percentage of their income on food because that is what they need the most. So in the United States, the percent of household expenditures on food is 6%, but in Kenya, it's 45%. So the poorer the country, the poorer the people, the more percentage that they spend on food. And this can end up leading to really horrible consequences. So famine is widespread death as a result of food insecurity. This is something to write into your notes. And so a famous piece of history is the Irish potato famine that happened in the 1840s. And the largest famine in history was in China. And this, it's just an awful part of history where 43 million people were dead as part of the Great Leap Forward. You probably learn more about that in your history classes. So throughout all of human history, we've had horrible famines. The other side of this is overnutrition. So, and you can kind of think of it as an evolution of getting to a point where we have too much food. So too many calories combined with a proper balance, improper balance of nutrition will lead to overnutrition. And so over 1 billion people are overweight and 300 million of these are obese. Now, this doesn't always come just from eating too much. Sometimes there's genetic diseases that are in here, but many of it has to do with the access of that people have to do with food. So let's talk about the human diet. There are 50,000 edible plant species, but corn, rice, and wheat make up 60% of what we intake. So we're not eating a diverse diet. So the per capita meat consumption is a really big important thing to talk about for environmental science, okay? And I'm not telling you not to eat meat. I'm telling you how it impacts the earth, and you get to make your own decisions. So meat consumption increases with economic growth, and the U.S. is the second highest per capita consumption of meat. You can see North America really has a high consumption of meat. Africa has a lower consumption of meat, but these numbers are changing a lot too. Many more people are starting to eat more meat. So here's the question: is there enough food for everybody? Right now, there's enough grain grown for 8 billion people, and grain is only half of the food that we produce. Okay, so that's to write in your notes. So let's talk about poverty. So how are we going to feed all of these hungry people? So the problem is unequal food distribution, not food scarcity. It's the problem is that there's no economic access to the food. We have the food and it's a dispersal problem. So here's prevalence of food insecurity around the United States. So you can see the different colors indicate where there's different food insecurities. So you can pause and look at that a little more carefully. So then the next one is political and economic factors. So refugees, political unrest, and poor governance often leads to starvation and hunger and famine. Now, a third thing is that we divert grains to feed livestock. So 40% of the grain in the world is used to feed animals. And if you remember that 10% rule, every time you move up the biomass pyramid, you only transfer 10% of the food. So it's true that we could feed many, many more people in the world if we all ate grain. So that's that idea of eating lower on the biomass pyramid and eating more vegetables, making a larger amount of our diet grains and vegetables than meat or things higher on the biomass pyramid like fish, because you can feed more people if they eat the grain instead of the cows eating the grain. So the solutions to feed 8 to 10 billion people are to put more land into agricultural production. So make grasslands and rainforests into places to eat. Now, we're going to hear about why some of these are bad ideas, but that would be one way. We could cut down forests, rainforests, and grow food. We can improve crop yields, new techniques and new equipment, and we could replace consumption of meat. So those are solutions, and we're going to talk a lot more about improving crop yields and the best way to do that. So that's in future chapters. And we could also, the other thing we could do is we can take more food out of the oceans. We can harvest more fisheries. So all these things sound good, but here's the problems to that. So you're putting this into your notes, right? So you've got solutions, and then the problems to those solutions, and then we'll have our discussion and come back. So here's the things that are causing problems here. Climate change is decreasing the amount of arable land where you can actually grow food. You decrease biodiversity when you cut down the rainforest to grow food. There's less water supply because irrigation is a major use of water, which we'll definitely be learning about more in this unit. And then there's degraded and diminished topsoil. If you use up all the topsoil, you can't grow food anymore and you have to use more fertilizer. And then there's a cultural resistance to eating less meat. People love their meat. And then a dominance of corporate special interests. So there is a huge impact by the meat and dairy industry and the fossil fuel industry. So a lot to think about, a lot to digest. Get it from the food. Okay. And we will have discussions about this later. Thanks for listening.